Good morning. It's a pleasure and a deep honor for me today to join one of the champions of restoring civility, Rob Stein, one of the founders of Democratic Alliance, amongst many, many things in his life. I let him speak about it. And my dear friend and colleague, a senior advisor to the Center for Responsible Leadership, Bart. And together today, we just want to discuss about what is the state of our union. Where is civility gone, Rob? What happened? Can you just take us back into when this trend started, where we are and where we can go?
Oh, Bawa, it's wonderful to be with you and Bart today. And I can promise both of you and whoever ends up watching this that we will be exquisitely civil. And so at a minimum, we will model the behaviors that we hope will spread throughout the world. What fascinates me about the conversation about the complicated state of civility in the world today and in America is, first of all, the tensions that we feel in the United States, of course, are global tensions. And virtually every country in the third decade of the 21st century is experiencing some form of severe income inequality and racial reckonings and in-migrations that are destabilizing, and the effects of social media on political conversation. And so we're seeing the rise of tensions and discontents in virtually every country in the world. And I'm not just talking about democracies, I'm talking about socialist and communist countries as well. But blessedly, what we call incivility in America is baked into our DNA. We are supposed to be combatant and free to speak our minds and fight with one another. What is frightening about some of the things that are going on, particularly in the United States right now, is that we have devolved into hating each other too much. And that's an incivility that is unacceptable. We cannot hate each other. We are e pluribus unum, out of many one. That is the fundamental premise of a constitutional republic, which we were created to be. And we can have profound disagreements and profound social and political and even economic tensions, but we cannot hate each other. And so we have to find a way of seeing and hearing and empathizing and listening to one another and resolving our differences in a more civil way. I never expect perfect civility, but I do expect greater tolerance and the ability to listen and to empathize.
Now, Rob, very, very articulate, very well said. Before I just react, the word tolerance just gets me all worked up. I'll tell you why. See, in 1968, UNESCO adopted tolerance as a minimum level. Today we are in 2021. Are we still at a stage we want to tolerate each other? And I hate you, I would kill you, but I'll tolerate you. I think this whole notion of tolerance must shift to mutual respect as a basic thing. When you say about Union and America and things around the world, yes, the thing is, we are the United States of America, not the red states or the blue states, right? We are the leader of the free world. We have been championing and exporting our brand of democracy around the world. And we are asking people to follow that. right? That brand of democracy was defiled on January 6th. Our sacred capital was defiled. And that is just absolutely unacceptable. Our brand of what we are asking the world to do has been tarnished. And to me is January 6th was a result of a lot of the breeding of hatred and divisiveness which is there in our society. And to me is going back, you've been around, you've been in with all the government people, you're based in the DC area. And where did this all begin? And why have we come to such a state that we can't agree in a civil way to disagree and then come together for the interest of the nation? I am always reminded by my Jewish family, my friends, okay? Between the Orthodox, the Conservative, the Reformed, everybody, when they get into a discussion, they have a heck of a discussion, passionate discussion, divisive. And you would wonder whether these people are ready to fight. But when it comes to the identity, they come together. They come together very civilly and support each other. Where is that spirit? Where is that chutzpah? Why? What are we lacking?
Yeah. Well,
tell us, Rob.
So the arc of history is very long, and causes and consequences of events are very difficult to parse and to sort of try to figure out when there was a shift. That's what historians can do for us 50 years later or 100 years later. They can look back and say, well, this was the moment. And, if I were to identify the root of modern, what I think of as hyper anxiety in the world, and particularly in America, I would say that a transcendent moment was 9/11, which we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of. I think 9/11 shifted community, national consciousness in ways that only historians are really going to be able to help us understand. But for those who don't quite remember 9/11, let me just give a quick iteration of what happened after 9/11. We invaded Afghanistan, we invaded Iraq. There was an anthrax scare that, for those who were in the Washington area, was a profound additional anxiety and fear. 4 or 5 years later, after the invasions and the military enterprises, we had an economic meltdown that scared everybody. And then and that was 2009, 2010. And then over these last 10 years, we've had a series of cataclysms that have been frightening, not least the ravages of climate change, fires and floods. And the election of Donald Trump obviously cranked up the divisiveness that comes. People fear and are anxious about other people when they're scared for themselves, when they're economically insecure, when they feel that there are outside forces coming in to replace them or to traumatize them. And so we've had 20 years of fear-based or fear-inducing events that have created great anxiety in America, great anxiety. And so this incivility that we feel now, the insurrection on January 6th, which was, Bawa, as you say, it was, if you bookend 9/11 with the January 6th insurrection, it's a pretty elegant framing of 20 years of meltdown, of a society that feels that it is unraveling. And so the only antidote to fear-based anxiety and hatred of other and social unraveling is for human beings to rediscover their shared their common interests and shared destinies. We must find the place where not our differences define us, but our similarities, common interests, and shared destinies define us.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Donald Trump. For me, the way I look at it, I think the problem was not Donald Trump. The problem was that there was all these feelings of divisiveness which are festering and which are being suppressed. He just gave those people the opportunity to come out.
That's right.
So we, you know, as one of my great mentors and friend, a civil rights icon, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, who worked with Dr. Martin Luther King, he was the man who was slapped on the steps, and after that he had the march across the bridge. Okay, he said to me a couple of years ago when I was with him, he says, "Bawa, boy, we thought that the days of segregation were over. We thought that we were integrated, but boy, were we wrong. We have our work cut out for us." To me, Rob, the question is, what is the state of our legislators? The senators, the congressmen, these people are elected officials, are there to serve. To me, number one quality of a leader is to serve, serve, and serve. And where is that notion of service gone? And can these people come together? We've seen some instances, as you know, Bart pointed out yesterday, of coming together on the infrastructure bill or the issues of gerrymandering. So what will it take to move these people to agree to disagree, but do it civilly, but come together for the sake of the country?
Can I actually jump in with a quick perspective on that, and then Rob, I would be delighted to hear your perspective. Couple of things that you both brought up, I think are worth highlighting, and just the idea. I mean, this concept of what we've gone through recently, I would refer to as kind of a populist exercise, and there have been many moments in history. I mean, going back to Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great, where some charismatic leader has given people permission to adopt a view and do so almost religiously, and that's not new. You know, hatred and racism certainly are not new, and harnessing those forces as a way of achieving a power grab is also not new. And in fact, you know, there are aspects of that happen, you know, at a basic level. I think in all of kind of political discourse, we just saw this in California, where you had the governor, Gavin Newsom, saying that the other candidate, once he could demonize the other leading candidate as being of the other, which is kind of an inverse of this, he was able to galvanize his support in a kind of reverse populist appeal. But the thing that I think is really profound, I mean, we've had worse periods in our history. Clearly, we've been through a civil war, we've had presidents assassinated, we've had you know, very significant violent episodes, though nothing like January 6th, you know, where the Capitol was attacked. And I think that's a particularly concerning form of populist fear, where there's a belief among some that this system is to be overthrown, that this system is to be thrown out, which is starting to get to your question, Bawa, which I want to get to in a second. But I just want to hit on Another theme which we can touch on more, but that Rob brought up in the beginning, which is about social media and the power of social media and giving people permission to feel a certain way that otherwise would have been shamed or otherwise would have been kept quiet, is a terrifying kind of thing. And what social media has enabled with that is for people to form those views in quiet places under the, essentially the permission of platforms like Facebook, where they know they can see it, they know it's happening, but it benefits them. And those views start to foment and grow. And then those people are galvanized into action, and they come and they storm the Capitol, and they do so effectively with the permission of the president. The president had enabled this and says now he didn't, but I think there's pretty clear evidence that he did. And we've now seen the weaponization of that hatred in a way that is truly terrifying. And so pulling back from that brink, making it so that those views are condemned. And this is the thing I think is most pernicious about where we are today. And I think it gets at Bawa's question, which is can lawmakers, we need to find a path for conservative lawmakers who want this country to survive and sustain and be successful, for them to be able to distance themselves from adopting the hatred and that perspective, and to be able to really draw a line in the sand. And right now, I don't think they can. 2 lawmakers have come out from the Republicans to be a part of the January 6th commission. So I think there's the antidote has to be exactly what you said, Rob, which is we are in this together. We are one country. The country is built on the ability for people to have multiple perspectives. We cannot hate one another. We have to come back from violence and those forces. And our leaders have to step up. They have to be responsible leaders.
Well, my response to Bawa's highly relevant question, which is how does our legislative branch, specifically Congress, become a truly representative republic? How do we how do we create the brilliant deliberative dialogue and deliberative and problem-solving body that our founders envisioned in the legislative branch? The legislative branch is broken in the United States right now.
Yep. And
so I have an answer that I don't think is going to satisfy very many people. But I believe that the balance of power in the United States Congress, 535 members, 100 senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives, are controlled by the voters of 30 states, in which Republicans control both houses of the state legislature in those 30 states. So there are 30 states in America that Republicans control the state legislatures. And I can't remember, but I think in 25 or 26 of those states, they also have the governors, or they're Republican governors. And so we have a kind of iron curtain, if you will, of states, many of them smaller, many of them rural, that have a very powerful influence and a very large delegation in Congress. From those states, 80% of the senators in those 30 states are Republicans, and 75% of the House members from those 30 states are Republicans. And that's the Republican power base in Congress. So here's my answer to Bawa's question. It isn't this generation of senators and members of the House. It's the next generation. We cannot endure, as a constitutional republic, unless and until our representative body is less less 60 and 70-year-old white men and more women and people of color from all over this country. We have to have a Congress that represents the diversity of America in terms of age, in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of regional representation, in terms of political perspective. And if we had a more representative Congress, we would have a better functioning America.
Very, very interesting, but dismal. But the hope is that somewhere down the line, in a generation or two, you still have hope. But, for me, as I reflect on this, look at it, I mean, countries like China, who we've been asking to democratize, must be laughing. They're saying, this is the kind of democracy you want for us. This is the state of affairs you want for us. Come on. I mean, the other day, Senator Lieberman on 9/11 said it very well when he said, we are more ununified than ever before. We are less secure than ever before. We see the future bleak, and we have lost our confidence in government. And who are the people responsible? We are telling the world to hold free and fair elections, right? But yet we question the very mechanism of our country's election system and sow the seeds of differences and sow the seeds for delegitimizing the democratic process. And so for me, as I'm reflecting on this, is when I look at a true democracy, it is one person, one vote. That is one of the foundations, and that's the guarantee of a democracy, right? The second part of a foundation of a democracy is having a healthy, robust debate. Debate the issues to the hilt, but then you come together. To me, are we a true democracy when we say we are a democracy, but then we have an electoral system, electoral college? So where is the value of one person, one vote?
Well, it's broken. I mean, everything you just said, it's broken. But I will say that there are changes happening in our economy and in our society, which are going to have massive ramifications on this political and ramifications that I think are really unclear, but that are going to significantly impact the political makeup of the country. And I'll give you one example. What we're seeing happen coming out of COVID is a fundamental shift to how we work in society. And that fundamental shift is also leading to a shift in where people live as a result. And so we've seen in many of the major cities through COVID, we've seen a bit of a diaspora of people leaving, going to, in many cases, their hometowns where their families are, where they can get support from their parents and grandparents for raising their kids, or just going to places that are more affordable, moving back to rural areas, because thanks to broadband, for those people who have access to it, in many cases, they can do their jobs now from anywhere. Many of these companies are shifting to we are as well, we're shifting to a hybrid style model. And as a result, you don't have to be in a city in the same way that you needed to before. What are the implications of that? It's hard to say, but I know anecdotally from friends and colleagues who have moved from California, blue California, to red Texas, and they come from a progressive viewpoint and they're now in a conservative state. They've made that move, and they're now facing the consequences politically of making that move, but they're galvanized to want to do something about it in their new or former home state. That's that, and I'm, I don't know, if and when, but I think that does speak to one of the many trends that are going to be leading to this kind of generational shift in terms of leadership and hopefully greater diversity. But go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, well, there will be a generational shift, and Bawa, it may be a little too far out for you and me to fully appreciate. Bart and his kids will be able to benefit from it. But a generational shift is in the works. And look, I mean, I think that the reason for hope, and I am hopeful, maybe not about tomorrow and next week, but about the near term and the long term. Because in many ways, there has been a searing of consciousness that where we are is not sustainable in terms either of a healthy constitutional republic or in terms of our own survival and humanity. The saving of our souls, if you will. And there are a lot of people across the political spectrum that are worried about the trends that are happening. And so collective consciousness is something that I'm not really an expert on. I think, Bawa, you may have more insights into it. But collective consciousness can shift. And if and when it does, we could usher in a renaissance, a really remarkable period of greater unity, of working to perfect our union and deeper and more meaningful social cohesion that brings about the kind of world that we dream of and has eluded us still for 245 years.
Well said. I love it. Let's do that.
I'm glad to hear that. But I think that what gives me hope is that unique leaders normally manifest when the times are most difficult. I think we are at one such time that I do believe that unique leadership will manifest. I believe in the core character of the United States of America. Whoever writes off the United States of America do so at their own peril. That's a folly. This is an absolutely unique country, unique place. And the people here, if you look at it by and large, we are the most generous country in the world. We give more around the world than any other country. Nobody comes close. The world looks up. Everybody wants to be in America. The truth is that. But what has happened now is that the confidence has been shaken, at least now, with the events and the recent events, especially the divisiveness, which has become so toxic. Today, if you look at it, in the last 4 years, anti-Semitism has grown more than 200%. It's unacceptable. What does it remind us of? The greatest tragedy of the last century was the Holocaust. 6 million innocent people, young children, perished. Why? Just because of a certain faith. Today, we are fueling that kind of divide. There are attacks against the Asian Americans. You saw that in Atlanta and other places in the country, in San Francisco. There are people on the brown skins who are being attacked. But this is the reality of the new United States of America. We are very diverse people now. It wasn't what it used to be. The question is our leadership, again, going back to our elected officials, are they cognizant of this? Are they conscious of this? And if not, what can we do to get them more engaged of the reality and being civil and being representative of the different interests in our country?
Well, I think one thing that I would just touch on there is that we have the leaders are following. I mean, many of the leaders that I think you're speaking to are following where they can find supporters and votes, and where they can find that sort of firm base of support. And on the right, they're having to follow a playbook that Donald Trump established, or they are out. And he has made that a very firm, has a very firm grip on that. But I think the thing that really powers that, the thing that underlies that, is that there is a permissive environment whereby extreme thoughts and extreme ideas have been made mainstream, and those are being, and so there's a connection there. There's a cycle between those extreme thoughts bubbling up through, sort of the cesspools of the internet, and then eventually making it onto mainstream television, mainstream social media, mainstream voices, where they're now inextricably linked, where you have, the January 6th sort of viewpoint, and sitting members in the Senate who are viewed to be, if not complicit, supportive, and that has to be broken. That has to be there. There has to be an adoption of never again, adopting this view of hatred, et cetera. I mean, setting aside, and fundamentally, I think that as we have to ask ourselves, is what happened the last few years, is that a blip, or is that the beginning of a trend? If that's the beginning of a trend, and I fear it is, because I don't see social media changing. I don't see the tool, and in fact, I see it getting worse, in the sense that now that extremist groups have seen what's possible, they're going to create their own mimicry of social media that speaks to their audiences, where they're in full control of it. And that's both good and bad. It's good in one sense, because it will make it harder for the mainstream to adopt those views and see those views, and which did happen, where there was this kind of permissive space where you could adopt a view of hatred, or let's burn down the government, or the left is evil, and what was all the QAnon stuff that the left is complicit in all these crimes, and people fundamentally believe that. And because it became mainstream, and they saw it in their feed enough times, and they heard it from people they respect and know, they started to believe it. So if that can be, if social media can either be policed or locked down in such a way so those types of views, QAnon, et cetera, which we're not seeing, by the way. The Wall Street Journal just put out a piece about how Facebook is not actively shutting down or combating these views. And I'm sure there's a lot of nuance there. It's complicated, but the flip side is that these kind of private warrens will still allow for that to grow. And so Rob, how do we fix that part?
Well, so do I have permission from the two of you to be the good news bear?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I think that's where we want to take this. So okay. Yes, please.
Okay. So I actually am consciously and excitedly optimistic about these next 5 to 10 years for this reason. Over the last few years, in matters affecting both the political processes of democracy, of our constitutional republic, as well as in steps that have been taken to fix some of the problems of capitalism, the states and localities and businesses of America have been laboratories for innovation. Yep. And let me explain what I mean. I don't know the exact numbers, but in 15 or 20 states, innovation in our electoral and our system of developing the representation within the states, we have seen new experiments to overcome gerrymandering in about a dozen states. We have seen in places like Maine and Alaska and New York City and a bunch of other communities, innovations that most people don't quite understand, called open primaries and ranked choice voting, that are shifting the electoral playing field and undermining the gridlock that the two parties have, and assuring that more people are competitive in state races and federal races in those states. And those kinds of changes, gerrymandering, money in politics, ranked choice voting, open primaries, are the future. And the more we open up these electoral systems and have fairer representation, better maps to determine what the districts are, we are on a path to reform how and who we elect. And it gets to my earlier point. If we have a broader choice in who runs for office and who's elected, we will elect ultimately, may take 3 years, may take 5 years, may take 10 years, a more representative Congress and more representative state legislatures. On the economic front, let me just say this. Friends of mine in the state of Washington, I don't know exactly when it was, I want to say 2014, 2015, had a crazy idea. The federal minimum wage was $7. And they said, this is nuts. That's not a livable wage. The minimum wage should be double that, it should be $15. And oh my God, the outpouring of socialism, and we're going to destroy every business in America, and it's not going to happen, and there could never be a $15 minimum wage. Guess what? 6 years later, 7 years later, however long it's been, the $15 minimum wage is practically universally accepted. I mean, most of the biggest employers are either at 15 or more and are moving faster. And that is revolutionary. What that means in terms of capitalism and the economics of our country is that wealth holders are sharing more of their profits with their workers, which is exactly where we have to go in this country. We believe in free markets, we believe in capitalism, but only if it helps to ameliorate and ultimately reduce income inequality. We cannot sustain the gross inequality that has seeped in the last 30 years, where the great wealth holders of the nation have an ever increasing amount of the wealth. And what we must do is we must share a bit more of the wealth of the nation with our middle income wage earners. And when we do that, they become more financially secure, and our country is a more robust economy. And so we are taking steps, guys, to actually fix capitalism and fix democracy. So be patient. It's a good fight, and we have to keep fighting, but we're going to get there.
Amen. Amen to that. From your mouth to God's ears. I'm praying for that. I want to be optimistic. I share your optimism. But, what is it that we here, like the Center for Responsible Leadership, the Alliance, the Democratic Alliance, and with all the anti-Facebook, anti-social media platform that Bart has set up, what can we individually and collectively do to get people, whether it's the staffers of the legislative bodies, of the senators and congressmen, or the others to come together and start to agree. For me, actually, I'm looking at President Biden, and I met him first when he was a senator many, many years ago, and we spent a few days together at the World Economic Forum, at the Middle Eastern World Economic Forum, at different forums. And he was a simple old bloke. He was a very nice guy. That's the way he came across. Okay. But having his experience of working across the lines in the Senate. And by the way, here I miss Senator John McCain. Okay. Because this man, you could not doubt his patriotism to the country. And yet I see today, there are people to the extreme left and extreme right. Isn't politics about centrism, of coming together on things which matter to us most? What can we do for those kind of things, Rob? Let's do something.
Yes. Well, here's why I am so honored and deeply grateful that I sit here with the two of you, because your lives are models of precisely what is needed from all of us. You're an ecumenalist, Bawa, and your life is bringing people together in dialogue and deliberation and problem solving. That is who you are in your very soul. And that is the model for the world. Facilitative leaders, leaders who are ecumenalists, leaders who understand that there are better angels of our souls, and have the skills to bridge differences. Differences are wonderful things. Diversity is a huge strength. We want to celebrate diversity of thought and diversity of race and gender. We want to celebrate it, but we also want to use it to find common interests and shared destinies so we can work together. And Bart, what you're doing with causes in helping organizations and companies find the spirit of community within their sphere of influence is precisely what we need to do in the society. It's always about finding community, finding common interest, finding an audience that shares dreams and ideas. And yeah, they can fight and disagree, but ultimately they understand, and this is the brilliance of causes, is that they understand that they're stronger and more able to thrive when they're in community.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
It's interesting times. But Rob, I know that we are coming to a close soon. I would love the people who will be listening to this to learn a little bit about some of your own research and in your Soar campaign, and then also the 5 faiths. I like that, new forms of faith. Now, please speak a little to that, if you will. Hopefully, the people who constantly are at loggerheads can agree to disagree more civilly.
Yes, well, you're speaking of an essay that I recently penned called 5 Faiths, in which I briefly make the case that our current state of hyper anxiety in the world and dysfunction, governing dysfunction around the world, requires, at least in our own country, and I would argue around the world, for us to take a leap of faith once again, because faith, not merely in a religious sense, but in a broader social, political, and economic sense, faith is a belief in that which you cannot see, but have confidence that can be achieved. And so the 5 faiths that I identify in this essay are faith, once again, in one another, faith in our constitutional republic, faith in our government, faith in free markets, and faith in the fact that globally, each nation is interdependent with each other nation. We cannot solve our global problems by ourselves. We need one another. We need our allies and we need our supposed adversaries if we're going to solve the great problems afflicting the world. And so we need to restore faith. We need faith in these spheres. And if we had that, we could do anything together.
That is brilliant. But how do we get there? How do we do those things?
Oh, you're going to lead us, Bawa, and trust me, Bart has a strategy.
Oh yes, I am sure of that.
Causes.com is going to become it's going to be the antidote to all of the dysfunctional social media. Trust me, that's going to happen. It's the unifier. Causes.com.
I sincerely and earnestly pray for that, because the world cannot, and we certainly cannot afford what the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams are currently doing, profiteering themselves, dividing the society.
Yes.
Those were imperialist policies. People, we must get over them. We must be the unifiers, bring together, because we have enough challenges to take care of around the world. Let's put our heads to that. Climate is an existential threat to the future of humanity. What are we doing about that? The economic divides, we are getting so polarized. During the pandemic, the top 1% added how many trillion to their wealth? And the poor became poorer.
Yes.
Okay, so that is unsustainable.
It's unsustainable.
So we ask 3 questions, Rob, simply, and we ask people, answer these for yourself. We don't judge you. The 3 questions are: do you make decisions based on the present or the future? Are those decisions based on conviction or convenience? Are they constructive or destructive? Now you be the judge. I ask you to please raise these 3 questions with all the congressmen and legislators that you have access to, and ask them to answer that. Ask maybe the people who elect them to ask them these questions and see how they score, and then see who they want to elect.
We'll bless you both.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been wonderful. And this is just the beginning. And I think many, many more dialogues to start on this. Get involved. If you have something, go onto the platform, record a video, start a discussion. We are all here in this together. Let's do it.